Reluctant Preppers provides educational awareness and commentary only. Opinions expressed do not constitute personalized financial advice. Viewers are encouraged to do their own research and seek qualified personal financial consultation before making investment decisions.
Does your family ever get exasperated with you for stockpiling such things as paper towels, bottled water, or toilet tissue? Well, they certainly can't object to you stockpiling money. Silver, the only money recognized by the U.S. Constitution, and your first 10-ounce bar of pure silver can be had at spot price with no premium by going to sdbullion.com/rp. And when you buy it that way, you'll be supporting Reluctant Preppers as well by going to sdbullion.com/rp. Thanks. This is a quick update to thank you for building our number of patrons to 76 and growing on patreon.com/reluctantpreppers. Soon, when we reach 100 active patrons, we're going to start sending out a 1-ounce U.S. Silver Eagle each and every month to one active subscriber, so you don't want to miss out on that.
Please help us grow by subscribing today at patreon.com/reluctantpreppers.
As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. We're always privileged to have this returning guest. He's wildly popular with our viewers. Rob Kirby, a proprietary analyst and expert on the gold and silver markets as well as financial dealings in general, is the founder of KirbyAnalytics.com. He's here with us today on Wednesday, September 5th, 2018. Rob, thank you for joining us here on Reluctant Preppers.
Pleasure to be with you, Dunnigan. You know, when you think about it, how detached the world has really become from reality.
That's a good one.
You know, today we had Alex Jones up on Capitol Hill. He tracks down Marco Rubio, senator from Florida, and he starts questioning Rubio about First Amendment rights. And Rubio is a sitting member on the subcommittee of communications technology and the internet. And they have recently been holding hearings specifically into InfoWars and Alex Jones and his proliferation and influence on the internet. And Rubio claimed to Alex Jones's face that he didn't know who he was and had never heard of his website.
Oh my.
Like, I watched the footage of it. He claimed he didn't know who Alex Jones or InfoWars was. So, from that, I can only say to you, is anyone really surprised what the metals markets are doing? Is anyone really surprised at anything when anyone in a position of influence can make candid comments that erroneous, that false, that far off base? Why would anyone be surprised that the markets are twisted and out of shape and beyond belief? I mean, it's really a slap in the face to hear. I mean that's just it's unmitigated lying, and to hear a man like that. You know, this is a guy who ran for president.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, and they speak ill of Trump. I mean, it's unbelievable. Like it's so disconnected from reality. And anyway, all I can say is, boy, it explains everything. And nothing should shock anyone at this point when that sort of thing can occur. Crazy town.
That's and it's not just. I remember when Hillary Clinton was questioned about Benghazi, and she said, "Well, they weren't aware, they hadn't heard, and these people weren't in the office, and this message didn't get through." Yeah. And I remember one of the conservative journalists saying, "Where were the adults at the time? Where were the adults?"
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And of course you get rhetoric from people on the left. You get rhetoric. Well, what does it matter anyway? Well, it doesn't matter much, except people died.
That's right. That's right.
People died.
And
anyway,
for those who are adherents to seeking the truth matters. And when they used to say plausible deniability, you don't even have to be plausible anymore. You just have to say it with a straight face long enough.
But to hear those words today, because Alex Jones, his crew was covering it live, and to hear that little dweeb say that he didn't know who Alex Jones was, never heard of him, and didn't know his website Infowars. And I mean, and when you consider the subcommittee that he sits on, that he's one of the most outspoken people on, and to hear that shill lie come from, I don't know, is he a senior senator at this point? I don't know. He's been there since what, 2010?
Not sure. Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable. It's really hard to fathom. Anyway, and what goes on, so as far as I'm concerned, what he said today was criminal. And, and we just have a daily occurrence now in our capital markets of, unmitigated criminality. Look, the big tell on the metals, a band of international banks were charged with rigging the price of metals. But there wasn't one American bank charged. You don't really need to say much more than no American banks were implicated in this at all. And the reason the American banks aren't implicated is because the American banks are immune from prosecution. Because the American banks are carrying out the work of the U.S. government, the Exchange Stabilization Fund, who is above all laws. So as such, they have basically got blanket immunity, because everything they're doing, if they're doing it for the Exchange Stabilization Fund, they're above, they're above questioning, and they can hide under that national security. Wrap themselves in the flag.
Yep, and secrecy.
I mean, but you see, that's no more perverse than Marco Rubio saying he's never heard of Alex Jones or Infowars. It's no more perverse. And I mean, and when you consider that a sitting senator would make that comment, to a recorded audience, is it really hard to believe that metals are rigged the way they are? Not to me. Makes complete sense. Anyway, anybody who tells the truth is not allowed to see the light of day in your country, period. It's we're headed for some very dark times here, which means that, the message that you're sending becomes all the more important. Because we're headed for dark times. We're not headed for dark times. We're in dark times now. And I think it's going to get a lot darker and uglier before it gets better. Because you know what? These crazed, lunatic, hair on fire lefties, they don't look like they've got any quit in them at all. And where they're running your country is exactly where Venezuela has gone. Same place.
How are things north of the border there in Canada? Do you feel any safer financially or for your constitutional rights of free speech then? Because those are the two main issues you're talking about here.
So far, I have not witnessed or experienced any clampdown on my ability to speak. But the way I really feel about leadership in Canada right now, I feel like Canada is a ship without a rudder. I don't believe we have effective leadership in this country whatsoever on the federal level, in particular. So Trudeau to me has been a massive disappointment. I look at the way the major files in our country have been handled in the last 3-4 years. I think the immigration file is a mess. I think the international trade file regarding NAFTA and all things considered around NAFTA, I think that's been handled extremely poorly. And the other big thing is the pipeline issue, which is regarding, basically it's got a lot to do with our sovereignty and our international trade as well. We don't seem to be able to build a pipeline between Alberta and the Pacific Ocean through the Rocky Mountains, and that is even after the federal government basically took control of the project. And we're no closer to getting that thing built today than we were a year ago or 2 years ago right now, the way I see it. So I think it's a disgrace. And I mean, I really think about what's going on in this country and the policies that have been allowed to stand in this country. Our national energy policy in Canada, we export roughly 2 million barrels a day to you guys.
Right.
And we sell our oil to you guys at a discount to West Texas Intermediate.
Right. You've talked about this, about the discounts, and that's in the past as far as being a raw deal for Canada.
Well, so we're basically selling you our oil half price, and you see, we are self-sufficient in oil. Technically, we don't need to import oil from anyone. We have more than enough. We are net long 1 million barrels a day that we can naturally export. But what we're doing is we're exporting 2 million barrels a day to you at half price, and we're importing 1 million barrels from the Middle East at full price, as in Brent crude price, which is higher than West Texas Intermediate. So we're taking $40 a barrel-ish bath on 1 million barrels a day. And despite what Trump says, we actually have a small balance of trade deficit with you guys. So, frankly, it strikes a raw nerve with me when I hear Trump really lambasting Canada on the trade front. And I know we have some anachronisms in our our supply management issue in the dairy I know it's a huge sore point with lobbies in America, but we are selling you our oil half price, and it's not like there has never been give and take. And I'll tell you one thing. I don't agree with everything Trump does and everything Trump says. And I don't particularly like his stance with regard to Canada on trade. But that being said, I do believe that Trump's hostility towards Canada on the trade front has a lot to do. The vibe I get is he has a very big dislike for our prime minister. And I think that a lot of that has spilled over into his treatment of Canada and the way Canada is being treated. And I would do one thing. I would only just a friendly reminder to President Trump. Trudeau is not rank and file Canadian, and is not what necessarily Canada stands for, at least in my opinion. And I mean, I don't think it would be fair of me to characterize all Americans as Marco Rubio. And I don't think Americans would appreciate it if I were to make gestures in that vein. On the same hand, I don't really appreciate the references to Canadians ripping people off that Trump continues to make. Yeah, we're ripping you off so bad we're selling you our oil half price.
Right.
You know what the reason we're given here in Canada is because our oil's dirty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's been some of the comments that we received when you brought up that topic in the past, people saying it's not an equivalent grade, we're comparing apples and oranges, that sort of thing. You have a different take on that.
It's actually a higher grade. It's synthetic oil. It's synthetic crude. Go next time you need an oil change in your car, Dunnigan, go in and see how much synthetic crude costs versus regular oil for your car.
No, I do that every time. It's very expensive.
Yeah. Well, guess what? Synthetic crude oil is a higher grade. It's a sweeter oil than West Texas Intermediate, and we're selling it for half price. So anyway, all I'm saying, there's give and take, and depends on which side of the coin you're on as to how that really plays out. I just bring up the point.
When you were talking earlier about the lack of what should be, the way things should be running as far as constitutional freedom of speech, and the way things should be running in terms of honesty and financial stewardship, and then you started mentioning about Canadian sovereignty, it made me think right away, because you talked about the U.S. Treasury and the Exchange Stabilization Fund and sort of this dark collusion going on and not the way things should be running. Well, how about Canadian sovereignty? Nestled up so close to the U.S., there's got to be this zone of influence there, and yet we have like the British vote for the Brexit, and Canadian, in some ways, Canada must be kind of caught halfway between Europe and the U.S. in terms of its alliances and its trying to struggle for its true sovereignty. What do you see that appears to be? You mentioned about the oil sale price, but are there other economic, financial, or policy issues that you think display a lack of Canada really being free to exercise its sovereignty because of its proximity to such an overbearing neighbor?
Well, let's just say that there are things that make me wonder these days when I hear the hubris coming out of major players in the Beltway in Washington, like the ridiculousness of Rubio, the ridiculousness of Chuck Schumer, the ridiculousness coming out of the mouths of the likes of Nancy Pelosi and the left coast crowd, who seem to me to be acting immaturely and dangerously, And I think I live in Toronto, and in Toronto in the last 5 to 7 years, we've had a rampant increase in gun violence. And guns are very hard to obtain in Toronto. Guns are very hard to obtain and to get in Canada, period. Okay? And I then start thinking about things like Fast and Furious. And I think any of your listeners would be aware that Fast and Furious was a program that was put in place by the Department of Justice. I believe it might have begun under Bush 2, but then was ramped up significantly under Obama.
Right.
And the thrust of Fast and Furious was the Department of Justice gave criminals in Mexico, drug cartels, they gave them weapons, or they supplied them with weapons, and they full well knowing that these weapons would be used in border skirmishes, and that people would die, and that there would and these guns would be traceable back to America, and then this killing would then be used to demonize the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms in America. And this was a plan largely hatched by the globalist entity. And, I can't help but wonder, given how hard it is for regular citizens to obtain guns in Canada, if there might be a Fast and Furious Northern Edition at play.
I see.
Yeah. Possibly. Because it's like, I've lived in Canada, or in Toronto, since 1971. And I'll just tell you something. Gun violence in Toronto has never been a common thing. But in the last 5 to 7 years, we seem to have 2 shootings a day here now. And I'll just say to you, Dunnigan, that's a dramatic increase by anybody's standards. Maybe not by American city standards, but by Canadian standards, that's a dramatic increase. And, there is a reason for it. And exactly what the reason is, I don't know. But I do know that Fast and Furious was a program that was, I believe it was extremely illegal and in contravention to everything your country stands for. But it was implemented all the same. And it makes me wonder if such a thing might be occurring here, with a view to quite possibly creating dissension and unrest and let's just say tugging at the social fabric of what our country has been traditionally. I wonder.
Canada, like the U.S., has been a cultural melting pot over the centuries with many different nationalities represented there. Certainly a model in the world for how you can do that peacefully. But have you looked into any of this rampant increase in violence just in the last half decade or so and correlated it with any increase in or change in the mix of what countries immigrants are coming from to Canada?
Well, I'm just going to say that the gun violence tends to be probably, at least the way I perceive it, as it's reported in the news, I would say it tends to be more prevalent among recent arrivals to the country. But in terms of marrying it to the most recent thrust in our immigration policy, which is largely it's been heavily skewed in the last 2 or 3 years towards let's just say African / Middle Eastern, Muslim, Arabic nationalities. Mm-hmm. I don't see a correlation necessarily at all on that front. And to be honest with you, I find it very difficult to actually draw direct parallels to any group or nationality from the immigration, other than to say a lot of immigrants to Canada come from jurisdictions where open carry is common and probably in most cases maybe even deemed necessary. And a lot of countries where immigrants are coming from, whether they're going to Europe or whether they're going to your country or whether they're coming to Canada, a lot of countries where we're taking in people from, let's just say a number of those countries have a lot less regard for human life on a macro level than what traditional Western society would have. And it's and I know it's a political don't go there to say such a thing.
That's right.
But anyone who's going to tell me that the regard for human life in many jurisdictions in Africa and in South America, Latin America, if you're gonna try and explain to me that they have as much regard for human life as we do here, big picture wise, that's a dog that doesn't hunt.
Yeah, some people are critical of the U.S. in that regard, that we would make the same claim. However, some of our policy wars all over the globe, all for the past many decades, would maybe say we have a regard for human life as long as it's not somebody else. We can go do that to them. But hey, how about some viewer questions we'd like to throw your way? Are you game for that?
Sure thing.
We've got this one, and you've spoken about this a little bit in the past, but if you could bring us up to date on your latest thinking on it about de-dollarization. Ice9 asks, Mr. Kirby, hello, do you believe the U.S. dollar will go through a reset, and will BRIC countries like China and Russia push for a new world reserve currency that's at least partially backed by gold?
Well, it was 2 weeks ago, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, the German foreign minister addressed this point very explicitly by making a statement that the world needs a non-dollar settlement currency for international trade. So we're not, see, it's funny, Dunnigan, a couple of years ago we used to talk about how China and Russia and the BRICS countries were making steps towards alternatives to the dollar in trade, and of course naysayers were saying 2 years ago, well, that'll never happen, and you're making a big mountain out of a molehill here, and what's really changed? Well, now it's no longer just the BRICS countries that are discussing this openly. Now we have Germany talking about it. So you see, I bring this up and I point this out specifically to the people who make the claim, Kirby, you've been talking about this for a long time, and what's really changed?
Right.
Well, when the Germans are now openly talking about an alternative to the dollar, an international trade settlement, that's different. That is moving mountains. That is dramatic. And what that also does is it shows a growing and you can actually plot it on a timeline, the growing rift between Germany and America, and let's just say the Eurozone in America, because Germany really is the linchpin in the Eurozone, and what it really does and likely signifies is Germany pivoting east. So there's a lot of people who would rightfully say, at least in my view, that this represents growing U.S. isolation in the in world trade. So there you go.
Yeah, that's not a perspective that most people have been anticipating, but it isn't remarkable when you hear people say, "Oh, nothing really substantial has changed," and then you start lining up all these dominoes in the way that you were about to, I think, when you were talking about that timeline. And I've heard you speak about that in the past. Do you want to remind people of just a few of those key landmarks on that line?
Listen, the growing dissension between Germany and America, I'm going to say it really began when Elke Koenig became the head of BaFin, the German bank regulator. She served as the head of BaFin from 2011 to 2015. And she got hot on the trail of the outrageous amount of derivatives and the shenanigans that were going on in the derivatives markets, of which Deutsche Bank was a major player in. And she became very aware that Deutsche Bank was engaged heavily in the gold trade and the precious metals trade, and that these markets were inherently rigged. And this led to German regulators raiding Deutsche Bank's offices. They looked at their books. They saw that Deutsche Bank was doing massive amounts of interest rate derivative trade with the U.S. Treasury, specifically the Exchange Stabilization Fund. And it was through this time period they also became very aware that Deutsche Bank was engaged in a massive rigging campaign in gold and silver markets. This prompted, they came down on Deutsche Bank like a ton of bricks. They had a number of chairmen of Deutsche Bank left the institution, I believe 3 of them over a 3 or 4 year period. Deutsche Bank left the official fix in London for gold and silver, and which then precipitated Germany asking the Fed if they could come and audit the gold that is on deposit at the New York Federal Reserve. The New York Fed told them to get lost. They couldn't come and take an account of the gold that was stored in New York. To which the Germans then said, if we can't come and take an inventory of our gold, we would like it back. And to which they were basically told to bugger off again. So fissures were being opened up between Germany. Let's just say the trust factor that previously existed between Germany and America, it was eroding, and I'm going to suggest eroding very quickly. What started to precipitate out then was BaFin ordered Deutsche Bank basically out of the derivatives market, because their book has been dramatically shrinking since about 2014 when it hit a high water mark. And with the reduction in And with Deutsche Bank not playing in the derivative sandbox anymore, this created more tension between U.S. and German interests. And this lack of trust between Germany and America was growing, Germany started to pivot east and started I'm going to say kindling or rekindling historic ties between themselves and Russia. So now we move along about another year to 18 months, and we have Volkswagen planning to build a engine plant in Russia, and basically the same timeline where Volkswagen announced they were going to build an engine plant in Russia, the Environmental Protection Agency suddenly had a big issue with Volkswagen's diesel engines in North America, saying that they weren't up to snuff in terms of their pollutants that they were expelling into the air. And lo and behold, a couple days after the engine plant finally opened in Russia, the EPA swooped in and hit Volkswagen with basically about a $15 billion fine relating to the engine issue. And this has caused, I know, immeasurable pain to Volkswagen. It's not going to put them out of business, but it's certainly hurt them. And that whole class action suit has been settled really only this year, and now we see another ratcheting up, as I said earlier, with the German foreign minister now saying that the world needs another alternative instead of the dollar in settlement of world trade. So there's quite a timeline. If you look at it over a period of time, there's been quite a deterioration in let's just say neighborly relations between Germany and America. And you could layer in on top of that, of course, issues with NATO, but I don't think we even really need to go there right now.
We've got another question from Jeffrey Morris about Andrew Maguire, and claims Andrew Maguire, otherwise known as a British commodities trader and whistleblower, on a recent King World News short interview, brings public attention to banks refusing to deliver clients physical gold when requested by owners. And if you have any comments or insights you can share with us about risks that people take when allowing others to hold on to their physical precious metals for them.
Well, I know people in the international gold trade who have encountered issues where clients have been denied physical delivery of their precious metal, even when they've held it on a segregated and allocated basis. I know of instances where gold has been refused delivery going back to 2009. So this is nothing new to me. I've been aware that this has been going on in different areas and different places around the world, and has been for a very long time. And this does not happen in all cases, but there have certainly been instances where very, very large holders have asked for their gold to be moved, and they basically get a runaround, or people holding it have tried to give them runarounds as to why it can't be moved or it can't be shipped. And I know that in a couple of cases in particular, it really was threatened to the supposed holder of the metal that it would become a very, very large international incident if they didn't make good. And I know of a couple of cases where central banks had to intervene to actually supply the metal that commercial banks dishonored their clients in terms of making good on delivery of segregated, allocated metal. So this is not news to me, and my guess is as time goes along, we're going to see more and more and more of this occurring. and at some point it will get very public.
Especially if you've already seen it at the sovereign level between the Germany and the U.S., as you were describing earlier.
Yeah.
Hey, we got another one from New World Forward who asks two questions. In the next crisis, if the Fed has to lower rates again, how would currency and bond markets react when their bluff of normalizing rates is exposed?
Great question, and I don't know the answer to it, but I suspect we're going to find out probably pretty soon.
Sooner than later. Second question there in the same from New World Forward. To save the financial system, do you believe bail-ins rather than bail-outs will be the method of choice by those in power?
My guess is we'll probably get a taste of negative interest rates, or we might very well get a taste of negative interest rates here in North America before we get to bail-ins. But I mean, my view of where the real economy is, and what we're being told about the real economy is about as genuine as Marco Rubio saying he doesn't know who Alex Jones or InfoWars is.
This is about, and this is, we've asked you in the past, and we give all of our guests the same break and the same disclaimer saying we don't expect people to have a crystal ball, but just to give us their gut based on their experience and the changes that they're seeing out there. This question comes from Paul Montgomery, who asks, V-Gorilla and Martin Armstrong and more all say metals won't move for 2 years. What does Rob think?
Well, I mean, whether metals don't move for 2 years or whether it's 2 months, to me is irrelevant. I mean, because at the end of the day, precious metals, in nominal terms, will go up, and they will go up dramatically. If I say to you, Dunnigan, your house is going to burn in 2 months or 2 years, I'm not sure which, but it's going to burn. Do you want to own fire insurance? My attitude is I want to own the insurance. Gold and silver is insurance, period. Monetary insurance, financial wealth insurance. You see, the problem with fire insurance, Donegan, you can't buy it when your house is on fire.
Right.
So you either own it before the house burns or you don't get it. And I've been on record, and I will repeat this saying, I do believe I will live to see a day when you cannot buy an ounce of gold with fiat money. I believe that day will come. I just want to make sure I'm positioned for it when it happens.
We've got a different kind of a question, this one regarding the role of potential upcoming cryptocurrencies that might be foisted on the public as the next solution to currency issues. Mark W. asks, I suspect that all crypto activity to date has been a, quote, beta test of public acceptance. Indeed, compliance is consent. And to me, that will be the tell. I don't trust it either, and I will not consent or comply, no matter the cost. However, I would wager that most will, for their lack of comprehension with respect to the true motives of such an implementation. So, Rob, turning to you, what do you see as the likely motivation behind any upcoming official propagation of government or bank-issued cryptocurrencies? What purpose would that serve that would from the powers that be?
Well, I mean, it's from the standpoint of a central bank or the U.S. Treasury, a currency that's backed by nothing would be highly more welcome than a currency that would need to be backed by anything tangible or physical, especially if you're in the game of creating money. But the whole blockchain process makes counterfeiting a very difficult task. So it's sort of a double-edged sword. But what I can say, based on my best information, is that the United States and different agencies within the United States government have been big players in the crypto movement themselves, and are substantial holders and owners of at least a couple of major cryptocurrencies that I'm aware of. So to anybody who thinks that the powers that be haven't been at work with the or playing alongside what's been going on in the crypto world, I would say think again, because they are players. They are players in it right now, and they're trying to get themselves more comfortable with how it all works themselves, because I see this as being a growth area. 3, 4, 5 years from now, the prevalence and acceptance of cryptocurrencies, in my view, will be much bigger than they are today. Mm-hmm. So exactly which cryptocurrency will be the winner or will be the most prevalent 3, 4, 5 years from now, I can't say. All I know is that this is a directional thing, and this is a train that, if it hasn't left the station already, it will be soon. And you might want to think about whether you want to have a ticket. I'm not saying put all your money into it at all. I'm just saying I think it would be naive to say that cryptocurrencies are going away. Cryptocurrencies are not going to end up being a complete bust, although many cryptocurrencies will fail. A lot like the internet bust of the year 2000. How many promising internet startups, the MySpaces, the AOLs, they failed spectacularly and incredibly. Nortel, but out of those ashes did come Apple, and did come Amazon, and these are the two biggest companies by market cap in the world right now. So crypto is going to be a bigger part of our lives going forward than it has been looking backward.
We've got a question from Dive, who asks, wonder if you can ask Rob Kirby what he suggests people do who don't have much money to invest in to survive the final collapse.
Well, there's a reason why there's a reason why silver is called poor man's gold. My view is that silver is probably the most, and it's been beaten. It's been beaten with a stick again this week, just on Tuesday. But for every ounce of gold that's mined out of the Earth's crust in a year, roughly 8 ounces of silver are mined out of the Earth's crust, and that would tend to indicate that nature is suggesting silver is about 8 times more plentiful, or put another way, roughly 8 ounces of silver should equate in some natural way to 1 ounce of gold. And right now, an ounce of silver is selling for roughly 1/85th the price of an ounce of gold. So my personal view is that why not load up on the cheapest stuff on a relative basis that you can get your hands on, and silver at $14 an ounce to me, or $14.20 an ounce, doesn't seem that expensive, and to me that seems like it should be within reach of most people if they want to put a few dollars aside. Anyway, I do believe, and even if there's more pain to come in the short term, I do believe that owning it and holding it will pay big dividends at some point in time.
This next question, feel free to decline if you wish, but I'll go ahead and ask it. It's from Broadsword Calling. It says, as Nicholas Nassim Taleb says, ask not what someone's financial and economic advice is, rather ask them to see their portfolio. So do you have any aspects of your personal portfolio in terms of rough percentages, or something that you think, from the thinking that you've done, you've decided towards real estate versus precious metals versus stocks or bonds or that sort of thing, just to give people food for thought?
For me, I don't own any equities, and I'm mostly a metal guy with marginal participation on the crypto side from time to time.
Fair enough. And here's the one from Repeal 16. You're going to crack up at the end of this one. Rob, when are you going to start using NYMEX and start taking delivery? Help us out here. Aren't you doing big metal deals? Oh, and has your dog started hunting yet?
well, NYMEX metal, at least in my view, is not for sale. So whatever they post in their inventories, NYMEX is not a hardware store where you go to buy metal. And anybody who believes that NYMEX is a place where people can go to obtain large amounts of metal, at least in my view, is somebody who hasn't really thought it through. The runaround, if you really want to understand how NYMEX really works, do some reading, do a little bit of research on your own, and research the Hunt brothers. Google Hunt Brothers Silver 1980. And you'll read the stories about how the Hunt brothers tried to corner the silver market by taking delivery of physical metal on the NYMEX, as you just stated. And what happened was the powers that be allowed the Hunts to accumulate a very, 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 very large, substantial amount of silver. Mm-hmm. And then they changed the rules. And then they said that the Hunt brothers were only allowed to sell. They could not buy any longer. Okay? So the Hunt brothers beat themselves a big path into the middle of the jungle, and then their machetes were taken away, and the jungle grew in behind them. Because the NYMEX is to begin with, it's not a free market. The NYMEX is a club. It's like an exclusive country club. And exclusive country clubs make their own rules. And if you're going to go into somebody else's country club and tell them, and if you think you're going to tell them how the game's played, I think you're going to find in virtually all cases that won't be the way the story ends. Because they will enforce their rules on you, and you will be the odd man out. And the Hunt brothers are great examples of just why you wouldn't want to do that.
That's fair enough. And I wanted to give you a chance before we let you go to add any particular thoughts that you may have based on your most current research for the benefit of our viewers that I didn't ask you today. What would you like to share? One last sort of parting thought for our viewers.
Chief, my parting thought is along the lines of, we are living in unprecedented times. We are the information that we're being given about our real world, it just doesn't pass muster. The state of our financial affairs, the state of our economy, how much money really exists in the world. These are things that we haven't been given straight goods on, any more than, if you just want to think about this again, Marco Rubio. He's a sitting member on the subcommittee of the Communications, Technology, and the Internet. Okay? Well, that subcommittee, the focus of that subcommittee for the past year has almost been exclusively Infowars.com and Alex Jones. And yet the sitting member from Florida, Marco Rubio, when he was confronted in person by Alex Jones in the Capitol today, you can Google this and you can go watch this. He said he'd never heard of Infowars and he didn't know who Alex Jones was. So if that doesn't tell you how completely and utterly upside down and how false the reporting is that we're being given and the lies that we're being fed by officialdom as to the true state of affairs in America, you better think again and give your head a shake.
Rob, thank you so much. We've been talking with Rob Kirby, the founder of KirbyAnalytics.com. He's been speaking with us live here on Reluctant Preppers. Rob, thank you for joining us once again.
My pleasure, Donnie.